In the heart of the desert, amid scorching dunes and stone fortresses, stands a figure clad in black, the white cross gleaming under the blazing sun. Who were these warriors who prayed with the same intensity with which they wielded their swords? The Knights Hospitaller were neither merely monks nor solely soldiers. They were sacred shadows who walked between heaven and war, guardians of the weak and executioners of the infidel. In this video, you will discover how this order was born of compassion and became one of the most powerful war machines of Christendom. From the Holy Land to the fortresses of Malta, we journey through centuries of faith, blood, and strategy. Prepare to uncover the secrets of the cross that became a sword. At the end of the 11th century, Jerusalem was not only the spiritual heart of the Christian world, it was also a city of strife, fever, and misery. For the thousands of pilgrims who crossed the Mediterranean and risked their lives on the dusty roads of the Holy Land, arrival in the Holy City was not always synonymous with salvation. Many fell ill, exhausted, or wounded. It was in this setting that an unexpected refuge emerged, a hospital built by Amalfitan merchants near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There, under the leadership of a man named Gerard, later known as Blessed Gerard, the seed of the Order of St. John of the Hospital of Jerusalem was born. Initially, the purpose was simple: to welcome and care for ailing pilgrims regardless of their origin. The monks and lay brothers who served there adhered to strict Christian rules of conduct, dedicating their lives to charity. But the order's destiny was about to change with the onset of the Crusades. When Jerusalem fell into the hands of the Crusaders in 1099, during the First Crusade, the hospital gained prestige and protection. The order was formally recognized by Pope Paschal II in 1113, acquiring autonomy to elect its own leaders and manage its possessions without episcopal interference. Thus was born, officially, the Order of the Hospitallers. The 12th century brought a new challenge. The Holy Land was far from secure. The Muslims did not accept the Christian presence, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem was a fragile conquest. As the conflicts intensified, the monks realized that prayers and medical care alone were not enough to protect the pilgrims. It was necessary to take up arms. The transformation was gradual, but irreversible. The Hospitallers began military training, forming armed contingents and building fortresses at strategic points throughout the territory. The first great demonstration of this new martial aspect took place with the fortification of Belvoir in Tuanti, the Jordan Valley, an imposing feat of military engineering. Over time, the Hospitallers accompanied Crusader forces into battle, protected routes, and took part in decisive engagements such as the Battle of Montgisard, 1177, and the defense of Jerusalem against Saladin. This evolution marked a profound shift, the fusion of faith and war. The Hospitallers were monks and soldiers, observing vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, yet they also became specialists in cavalry, siege tactics, and direct combat. They wore black mantles bearing the white eight-pointed cross, symbolizing the Beatitudes and spiritual purity. The figure of the Hospitaller Knight soon became both feared and revered. They did not fight for personal ambition or wealth, at least in theory, but as an expression of their faith and commitment to Christendom. The sword wielded by these men was not merely a weapon, it was an instrument of divine justice, at least according to their worldview. This blend of mysticism and militarism gave the order a singular, almost mythical character. At the same time, the order organized itself with ever greater complexity. It possessed estates and administrative centers throughout Europe, known as commanderies, which raised funds to support efforts in the East. The hospital network grew in parallel with the military structure, creating a machine of power and influence with reach to every corner of Christendom. Jerusalem might have been conquered, but the Hospitallers knew that the crusade never truly ended. Faith demanded vigilance, discipline, and the willingness to bleed for an ideal. Thus, the order that began with an act of charity gradually became one of the military pillars of medieval Christendom. After the final loss of Jerusalem in 1187, with Saladin's victory at the Battle of Hattin, the Christian presence in the Holy Land began to wane. Fortresses fell one by one, and the Hospitallers were forced to withdraw alongside other military orders, such as the Knights Templar. In 1291, with the fall of Acre, the last Christian stronghold in the Levant, the Order of the Hospitallers faced a crossroads. Without a fixed base in the east, where would they continue their mission? The answer came in a bold move. Rather than return to Europe and disperse, the Hospitallers set out to seize a new insular fortress. After brief interludes on Cyprus, they turned their eyes to a strategic gem of the Aegean, the island of Rhodes. Situated between the Byzantine world and the Ottoman domain, Rhodes was a crucial hub on trade and military routes. In 1309, after a series of military campaigns and skillful negotiations, the order took possession of the island and established it as their new headquarters. Thus began the naval era of the Hospitallers. In Rhodes, the Order of the Hospitallers flourished like never before. The island was transformed into a colossal fortress, with walls that defied cannon fire and castles seemingly hewn from the rock. The city of Rhodes became a fortified command center where knights from various linguistic tongues, since the order was divided by nationality into so-called languages, gathered to plan strategies, train armies, and administer vast estates stretching from France to the Holy Roman Empire. But it was not only land warfare that defined this new phase. The Hospitallers also became a naval power. With their own fleets, they patrolled the eastern Mediterranean, attacking Muslim corsairs, protecting Christian vessels, and frequently engaging in full-scale naval operations. In some instances, they acted almost like sacred pirates, plundering ships in the name of faith, an act seen by Christendom more as religious zeal than crime. In this context, the order acquired an aura of invincibility. The Knights of Rhodes were dreaded by their enemies and admired in Europe. Their discipline, organizational prowess, and tenacity in combat became legendary. Even the Pope recognized the strategic importance of the order as one of the last bastions of Christendom against Muslim expansion in the Mediterranean. As a result, the Hospitallers received ever more donations of land, wealth, and privileges, solidifying their near-sovereign autonomy. However, this golden age also brought internal challenges. Coexistence among the different nationalities within. The order was not always harmonious. Conflicts over power, prestige, and coveted positions became commonplace. Yet, in the face of external threats, the Hospitallers maintained strategic unity. They knew that the fortress of Rhodes was a spark of faith surrounded by gathering darkness, and the greatest shadow came from the east. The rising Ottoman Empire did not look kindly on the presence of this Christian order on its flank. In 1444, the Ottomans launched an offensive against Rhodes, but were repelled. Nevertheless, tensions mounted, and the threat was clear. Sooner or later, the Muslims would attempt to crush that fortress. And when they did, the Hospitallers would be tested as never before. Between the stone walls and the cold corridors of the citadel, prayers and metallic footsteps echoed. The knights knew that the final siege was approaching. Yet, as in the Crusades of old, they wielded the sword with the same hand that clasped the rosary. The cross and the blade still marched side by side. The year was 1522. The bells of Rhodes Cathedral tolled a mournful peal, announcing what all feared. The Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent was marching against the island with a colossal army. Leading over 100,000 men and an immense fleet, Suleiman sought to extinguish once and for all the symbol of Christian resistance that had flourished on Rhodes for 2 centuries. Opposing him were around 7,000 knights and soldiers, commanded by Grand Master Philippe Villiers de l'Isle Adam, preparing for what would become one of the most dramatic defenses of the Middle Ages. For 6 months, the fortress of Rhodes held firm. The walls trembled under the Ottoman cannons, which day and night sought to breach them. The knights fought with desperate courage, driven by faith, honor, and the certainty that no reinforcements would come from Europe. They battled in tunnels, on towers, and along the alleys of the ruined city. Every stone, every corner became sacred ground. Despite heavy losses, the defenders maintained order and discipline. It was a war of attrition, but also a symbolic conflict. The world watched the clash between 2 spiritual powers. The Hospitallers knew that if Rhodes fell, there would be no nearby stronghold to halt the Ottomans. Yet the enemy was overwhelming, and hunger, disease, and exhaustion began to break their resolve. In December 1522, Villiers de l'Isle Adam, after direct negotiations with Suleiman, accepted the terms of surrender. In an unusual gesture of respect, the Sultan allowed the Hospitallers to leave the island with their possessions and weapons, acknowledging the valor of his enemies. Thus, after more than 2 centuries, the White Cross departed Rhodes, not as the defeated, but as the survivors. Landless, leaderless, and with their prestige shaken, many believed that the Order of the Hospitallers was doomed to obscurity. But like a phoenix of Christendom, they were reborn. After years of peregrination through Rome and other cities, in d.d. 1530, the Emperor Charles V granted the order the islands of Malta, Gozo, and Tripoli in exchange for a symbolic tribute, a Maltese falcon each year. Thus began the most enduring, and perhaps most glorious, chapter of the Hospitallers. Malta was an arid rock in the central Mediterranean, but it held inestimable strategic value. The Hospitallers wasted no time in transforming it into an impregnable fortress. They built the city of Valletta, named in honor of Jean Parisot de Valette, one of the Order's great heroes. They established a complex defensive system with bastions, walls, and fortlets capable of withstanding the most modern 16th century cannons. In 1565, their next trial by fire arrived. The Siege of Malta, once again instigated by the Ottomans, became one of the most heroic episodes in European military history. Outnumbered, the Order held out for months until Spanish reinforcements arrived and forced the invaders to withdraw. The victory cemented the Order's reputation as a bulwark of Christendom. In the centuries that followed, the Hospitallers continued to operate as a naval, administrative, and medical power. In Malta, they established hospitals advanced for their time and maintained an almost sovereign command structure recognized by European powers. Although the crusading spirit waned over time, the Order retained its relevance until the 18th century, when it was shaken by the political transformations of the modern world, especially with the arrival of Napoleon. But the legacy of the Hospitallers endures. The modern sovereign military Order of Malta, although no longer a military force, remains active as an international humanitarian organization with observer status at the UN. Its white 8-pointed cross still shines, no longer on the blades of swords, but on flags that symbolize aid, dignity, and service to others. From the silent corridors of a hospital in Jerusalem to the impregnable fortresses of Rhodes and Malta, the Knights Hospitaller traversed the centuries as sentinels of faith and war. Their story is more than an account of conquests and battles. It is the living testimony of an idea that adapted over time. the defense of the sacred, the protection of the vulnerable, and loyalty to an ideal that transcends worldly life. At Re, the height of their power, the Hospitallers were monks, warriors, engineers, diplomats, and lords of a sovereign state in the heart of the Mediterranean. They embodied the profound tension between spirituality and violence, between healing and killing. This duality, sometimes controversial, mirrors the complexities of the medieval world itself, where the cross and the sword walked hand in hand. Today, even without castles or armor, the spirit of the order endures in the modern Order of Malta. The organization that once sheltered pilgrims with lances now aids refugees with medicines. The one that defended fortresses now defends human rights. This shows us that the structures of the past, though transformed, still directly influence our conception of duty, faith, and service to others. And if we look closely, we will see that the echoes of the White Cross still whisper in charitable institutions, in ambulances crisscrossing our cities, in hospitals that welcome without distinction. The world has changed, but the mission, perhaps quieter, but no less noble, remains alive. If you enjoyed this journey along the crossed paths of faith and war, leave your comment, share with fellow history enthusiasts, and let us know, which other forgotten chapter of the Middle Ages would you like to see here? Until the next journey.